Okay, folks, as it's just after 7 o'clock, I think we will get started with this Ward 1 and 2 virtual town hall. I know there will be a few more joining us. I'm delighted to say we had about 60, a little over 60 people register for tonight's town hall. We've got a little more than half that in the Zoom so far and more coming in. I will make just a couple of notes about how tonight will run, and then just some very brief opening remarks before turning it over to Keenan and Claire to say a few words as well. But of course, the purpose of tonight is to hear from you and to hopefully answer some of your questions over the course of our time together. The event tonight, this is being recorded. Just a reminder, we're recording this so that we do have a record of all the comments and concerns raised. And in the event that we can't get to something or answer it, it helps us to be able to follow up afterwards. But a reminder, because it is being recorded, not to give out any personal information during the course of the meeting. If you do need to provide your address for follow-up or your contact details, you can of course contact my office afterwards. Lauren Wild from my office is on the call, and we're being assisted tonight by Rob Emerson from the City of Barrie, and CAO Michael Prowse is also on tonight. But my email, of course, is officeofthemayor@barrie.ca, and you can follow up. If we don't get to your question tonight, and we probably won't get to everyone's question, you can of course follow up with us. You should see a few things at the bottom of your screen. I think by now many are familiar, very familiar with Zoom. I certainly am. I spend a lot of my time on this app. The two things there, if you want to ask a question, please raise your hand. And that is, that's to let us know that you want to ask a question, or you can type your question in the Q&A box, and Lauren will ask that for you. So Lauren, as the moderator, will be switching between the raised hands and the Q&A and some of the submitted questions that were sent in ahead of time. We did have so many, we won't be able to answer all of those. So again, if we can't get to your question tonight, please just email us. And just a note, of course, we're now up over 40 people, and as the whole city is, we're a diverse group of people with varying different life experiences and backgrounds and points of view. So we just ask that, as always, whether we're in person or on a Zoom like this, that everybody try and engage in respectful dialogue. Everyone has very valuable input that we want to hear during the session. So with that, just a few remarks from me as we sort of sit here a few days before Canada Day, and after more than 3 months of what I'm getting tired of calling unprecedented times. Since the middle of March, of course, life has changed dramatically, and we're learning new ways to do things, whether that is our daily behavior or our businesses or economic activity, and certainly all of us at the city. We were all asked early on to participate in a collective goal, and that was stopping the spread and flattening the curve. And by and large, we have been able to do that in the city of Barrie. We've been able to do that in the province of Ontario, but here in Barrie, we were able to do that before many, and that is only because of our collective action and our willingness to support each other by doing what was necessary to try and protect each other. Those things are still necessary, notwithstanding we are reopening. Chuck Gardner, our medical officer of health, reminds me all the time, distancing is the key still, wearing masks when we're in places where we can't distance. Doing those things and continuing to look out for one another are the best things that we can do to continue to make our way through these difficult times. On an optimistic note, I would say with the reopening has come the opportunity for some of our businesses to get back to work. Many have learned to do business differently, not only in terms of their physical space or the protection of their employees or the way they handle their customers in and out of their premises, but also by moving much of their activity online. And we've seen that in everything from major retailers and industrial concerns to the Barrie Farmers Market, who offered curbside for some weeks before now being able to operate in the back parking lot of City Hall, admittedly with a reduced capacity. And as we move on through the summer, if things go well, there will be further reopening. Our city facilities will further reopen gradually and only as we're sure that we can operate them safely. And the same will go, I think, for much of the community. I think in doing that, one of the things that's been uppermost in our mind is that what we ask of people in terms of distancing and protecting one another, we need to be able to support. And so, you know, lots of times during this crisis, the province has said, okay, this is going to be able to open tomorrow or Friday or whatever. And sometimes it takes us as the city longer to open than that, or it takes a business longer to open than that. And that is because we need to make sure we can do it safely. And there are some things that, notwithstanding they're possible, they're not really feasible under the circumstances. And so, for example, our day camps, which in a typical summer would have 6,000 children participate, this year we'll operate in a much different format and are greatly reduced. Some city facilities remain closed, but others have begun to gradually reopen. And I think if I can make a very general comment in closing, not only am I intensely proud of this community and the way that it's responded, not only am I proud of the way that people have rallied around our charities and supported those who needed help, whether they were next door or through an organization that supports our less fortunate members of our community. But the effort has been consistently made, I think, by all levels of government to work together. And with a few exceptions, we've seen a degree of cooperation in combating COVID that I wish we could see all the time. And I hope that this time, that collaboration and the collective sense of duty to one another is something that we don't lose, or at least we don't lose entirely as we continue to reopen and we consider a post-COVID world. So with that, the purpose of town halls, of course, is to answer questions both small and large, and I hope to do that. And at this point, I will hand it over to Ward 1 Councillor Claire Ripa to make a few opening remarks.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. I'm just going to echo a fair bit of what you've said. I mean, it is summer in Ward 1, and you know, that's really terrific. I see a lot of people out walking and biking and rollerblading and out on the water, and you know, it's a wonderful time of year, and COVID has changed everything for everybody. There are a lot of people that are struggling, but I also see in Ward 1 a lot of people reaching out to these people and to businesses and being very supportive. So I'm really, just like Mayor Lehman said, I'm really proud of Ward 1. I'm really proud of what Barrie has done during this really tough time. And you know, you kind of think about, well, what is life going to be like after COVID? Dare I even imagine that? But I hope that, yes, life will change, but I'm also hoping that we will be able to keep some of the good things that we have found during this time. You know, as I ride my bike or walk through Ward 1, you know, I see kids drawing on the sidewalks, and I see, you know, families out together, and I see an awful lot of really good things happening. And so I hope we can keep that going, and that we can even grow our community, that sense of neighborhood and fellowship. So I mean, I think in the meantime, yeah, we have to, you know, still keep our physical distance. We still, you know, wear a mask where it's possible, where you need to, wash your hands, you know. And I think especially we really need to work really hard to love one another. And so I'm really looking forward to the future. I think it'll bring us some challenges, but at the same time, I think we're up for it. So yeah, I'll let Keenan take it from here.
Thanks for that, Claire and Mayor Lehman. Really appreciate those comments. Hello, everyone. It's great to see so many familiar names in the attendee list. I can see a bunch of people from the waterfront condos, and I can see you from my window, from my apartment downtown, so I'll give you a wave. It's pretty amazing that we're able to do this. When I got elected, I made a promise to engage the community in the political process, and you know, I've been having monthly meetings at the library, drop-in discussions, and there were wonderful discussions. We didn't always agree, but it was an awesome way to build community and to bring new ideas to the table. And so I'm happy that we now have this new platform to do that. When COVID hit, I have to be honest, I was unsure of what my role should be as a councillor. I remember talking to Mayor Lehman and the staff in his office about ways that we could help as councillors. And one of the first things that they suggested was that we reach out to all of the buildings in our ward, all of the long-term care homes. And time and again, I was astounded that when I called all these, the building managers would go on and on about how the residents in those buildings had really rallied around each other and rallied around the most vulnerable people living in those buildings. I think a lot of people have a misconception about, tall condo buildings, that it's not a community. People get in the elevator, go in their condo, and that's it. But they're like a little village in the sky. And I think that's a pretty beautiful thing. And the amount of stories that I've heard from around Ward 2 of people coming together is inspiring. And I hope we take the opportunity of this crisis to reevaluate some of the things that aren't working in our city, in our world, and commit to fixing them and doing better, because we can always do better. So I'm just thankful you're all here and looking forward to hearing your questions and having a discussion tonight. Thanks so much for being here.
Okay, so Lauren Wild is going to moderate for us, and we can get right into the questions. So Lauren, why don't you launch the first question at us?
Wonderful, thanks for that. So we've got Elaine, and I'm going to unmute you now, Elaine, if you'd like to ask your question.
Oh, you're still on mute, Elaine. I don't know if that's on your end.
Unmute. Am I okay now?
We can hear you now. All right.
So I've been on Zoom before, but this is the first time I only see 3 people. The mayor, is that right? Because usually I can see a whole bunch of people, everybody who's Zooming, but it's not like that.
No, you can just see the panelists. There's about 60 other people, but just us on the screen.
There or not. Okay, so I sent an email to Mayor Lehman about the streets in Barrie. That was my major concern. And I believe you replied and said that the work would be done on these streets, which are in terrible condition, in the year, I think it was 2022. Do you recall that?
Remind me which roads in particular you were talking about, Elaine.
Those are just where I live. John Street, Victoria Street, Vespra, and those streets going from Innisfil Street to Bradford, or, Bradford, Innisfil, and John Street is terrible too. And Park Street, there's so many of them. And here's another one, Mary Street, which is now going both ways. So it's easy to get into the liquor store, not so easy to get out. So there's a problem there. And then I have one other question. I read today in this little email that will get Barrie today, I believe it is, and there was mention about having a low-income building development on Vesper Street, where the old the police station, fire station used to be. And I don't think it's for this year or next year or whatever, but I was wondering what kind of people would want to move in there when there's no schools around, for if they have children. There's no elementary schools, there's no high school. So that's the 2 points I want to make.
Well, thank you very much for that. And in reverse order, the closure of the schools in the central city was something that, of course, City Council fought, but the school board chose to go ahead with. And our argument at the time was that there may be fewer students in the area now, but there certainly will be in the future. And now with the scale of development plans that are arising, especially along Bradford Street and so forth, just because they're condos and many of you live in them, Yeah, there are fewer kids for sure, but there's not zero. And there are a number of townhouse and mid-rise developments as well in the area, and we often get families in the larger apartments there. I think the answer to your question, though, as well, is that people do choose neighborhoods based in part on what's available to them, and we might expect, whether low income or mixed, and you know, social housing is usually a 60-40 mix of market rent housing, regular market rent housing, and 40% rent geared to income, which is the subsidized housing. We often in our developments in Barrie housing that are in neighborhoods further from schools, we get more older residents. So one of the tragedies of the social housing wait list right now in Simcoe County is that seniors have the longest wait. And I think you might expect, especially if the development is geared towards seniors, that it might, as the private developments in the area do, attract a bit of an older demographic. Just to guess, it's very early days where, you know, that remains to be seen, but that's what I could tell you today at this early stage. The second thing on roads, yeah, your entire neighborhood is scheduled for what's called a neighborhood renewal. That's where we do somewhere between 5 and 15 streets all at once, all in the same neighborhood. We sort of move from street to street week by week. We've done that in two neighborhoods in Barrie already, and one that will happen later this year. It's much more cost effective. It does mean that you know, there are roads in the same neighborhood that are sort of being worked on in sequence, but a lot of paving work doesn't take all that long, as many of you know. It's a matter of a few weeks rather than months or something like that. So the idea is, by doing them all together, not only do we sort of localize the disruption rather than having, you know, different streets in different areas at the same time, but it's much more cost effective. So now the last thing I would say on that is, you know, about 10 years ago, we were spending between $5 and $10 million a year improving the condition of roads. Last year, we spent about 40 million. And the reason we were able to do that is because we have this dedicated infrastructure levy where we said we're going to set aside a portion of the tax increase every year for nothing but state of good repair, because the number one complaint we get from Barrie residents whenever we ask about our services is the condition of older roads. Keenan, Claire, anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think you covered it. I mean, I went to Prince of Wales and I went to Barrie Central, so I was sad to see those schools go.
Too. Yeah.
That was my first experience in politics, actually,
yes.
and
how I met Keenan.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's true.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it is sad that we don't have that in our downtown. But I think the mayor made some good points about the type of demographic that we're attracting to our downtown. And I do still see families moving down here because it's such a beautiful place to be. It's nice to be within walking distance of the shops and restaurants and the waterfront. So, you know, that's school's just one part of the puzzle when people decide where to live. But I appreciate the question. For sure. Go ahead.
I think that it would be very important to make sure that there are children in the area also. You know, I think it's sad when, like, you don't want to turn into Lake Elliott Lake there with just retirement people. Yeah. I mean, I live in my own house, but I'm retirement age for sure. But I'd like to see children around. And the other thing, this is just a question. Are vehicles allowed to park in the street? Like on the street in front of their house rather than in the driveway. And I'm saying winter, summer, day and night. Is there not a bylaw against that?
In the winter, they can't from December to the end of March, but for the rest of the year, yes, they can.
Okay, so if there are vehicles parked in the street in my area, who can I call? It's in a very bad intersection where these two vehicles are parked. And I think it can be dangerous. But who do I call about that? I don't want to call the police.
Yeah. So, and we should let others ask questions, but Elaine, call Service Barrie tomorrow morning, 726-4242. Yeah. If they're blocking the sight lines or breaking a bylaw, then they'll be ticketed.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much.
Thanks you.
Elaine. Take care.
So we have a couple of questions in our Q&A. The first is a comment from Donna. Please do not cut the police budget. These individuals are doing a phenomenal job and their new community policing efforts is amazing. We also have a question. to follow from Nathan. Will the Barrie Police put community first and us citizens first by redirecting funding for mental health and stop using tasers since it has been proven to be lethal and not an alternative weapon? Some keep saying it.
Sure.
I can
Go
start
ahead,
off with
Keenan.
this
Yeah,
one
sure.
if you want. So thank you for both of those questions and comments. Absolutely, I think Barrie Police are doing a fantastic job in our community. Barrie is consistently ranked one of the safest communities in the whole country. But we know that the Barrie Police budget is a significant portion of our overall budget. It's more than 20% of the entire City of Barrie budget. And that's 3 times more than what we spend on paramedic services, social housing, and long-term care combined. And so I think it is important that we have a conversation about what a shift in that spending could look like. Instead of just focusing on treating the symptoms of the issues that we face in our community, shifting to deal with some of the root causes. So that can look like investing in mental health services. It can look like investing in housing. We are in the midst of a housing and homelessness crisis in the city. We're in the midst of a global pandemic. We have a long-term care crisis. So what a lot of people are asking is it possible for us to shift that spending? I think it's definitely worth looking at and having a conversation about. And so I hope the Barrie Police Services Board will do that. And I know they have talked about that issue at least once, and their budget process is coming up. And I'll let Mayor Lehman jump in since he is a member of the board.
Sure, and thanks for that. The core idea of defund the police, which is to address root causes, and that there are other services that are probably more appropriate than the police to answer a lot of the calls that police are called on to answer. I agree with both of those ideas. And in fact, you would probably find many, many in the police service who agree with that. They know that they are a very expensive solution for a barking dog at 3 in the morning. And they're also not, always trained or even best positioned to assist people with certain types of calls. When you look at the 55,000 calls a year that the Barrie Police receive, many of them occur during certain hours of the day. And one of the challenges and one of the reasons I'm concerned about any kind of immediate defunding is they're there 24/7. They're on the other end to help people as best they can at every hour of the day. And so for us to shift calls to other services, we need to build them out to 24/7. It's one of the reasons why the police themselves, part of the police budget includes funding mental health caseworkers who ride in a cruiser and attend mental health calls. That's a first step. We need much broader mental health support and, in fact, crisis level support to assist with a much broader problem. I think, my own view is that the Barrie Police as a 24/7 service are available to us and do an excellent job of responding to a huge diversity of calls, but 89% of the calls they receive are non-criminal. And they would themselves tell you, and we have had the conversation around the board table for years, many of those calls do not ultimately need to be answered by police, but you've got to have an alternative in place first, because people need to get an answer and a response when those emergency calls come in. The longer term issue of reducing those calls, of treating the root causes of why people end up cycling through the system is absolutely the right answer. And whether that is supportive housing, mental health supports, employment supports, the social determinants of health. Before the last few weeks, just before the last few weeks and the protests that have occurred, we received the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan draft at the Barrie Police Services Board, which focuses almost entirely on the need to invest in root causes. So yes, expect to hear more from the Barrie Police Services Board about this. But I am of the belief as mayor that until you are able to adequately offer alternatives, we need to continue to have a police service that can answer every call for service that it receives.
Yeah, and I think that we should be looking at broadening the kinds of things that the police are capable of doing. So rather than hiring more police officers, maybe we should be looking at hiring far more social workers and people like that who can really start to address the issues that people are experiencing. Because the solution is not necessarily to send an armed officer to every call. The solution is to find a solution to what these people are really experiencing. And as the mayor says, many of these calls are not sort of criminal in nature, they're social in nature. And so I think we need to expand the scope of what the police do, so that they can answer those questions and those issues that come up in everyday life. And of course, there's always that need to have the response to the criminal activity, for sure. But the police have really started to become, in the last number of years, decades probably, sort of the social workers of the city, and we need more people that can really work with the social issues that they're facing.
Thanks for that. And if anyone wants to discuss this further, because I'm recognizing we have a bunch of people waiting to ask questions, feel free to give me a call at 705-733-5192, or shoot me an email. You can find my information online, and I'd be happy to chat with you about it more.
Okay.
So thank you. We have the next question is from Andrea. Is there a plan to plant trees at Dunsmore and Cheltenham Park, as there's a lot of free space that isn't used for recreational activities?
Councillor Rima, do you happen to know the answer to that one? I don't offhand.
And you know, I don't know the answer to that, so I'd be happy to find out and let the person know. So if we can get a name and address, I'll happily get back to you in the next day or so.
Yeah,
Perfect.
please email us. Yeah.
So we have a question from Judy. Is there a date set for the water main replacement on East Blake Street?
I feel like a test and I'm failing. I don't know that one offhand, but what we can do is take a look at our capital budget. We'll see if we can get you an answer before the end of the town hall, Judy, but if we can't, that's another good one that we should be able to give you a straight answer on via email or a call.
Perfect. So we have a raised hand from Ken. So Ken, please join.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Hi, Ken.
Okay, how are you tonight? I want to thank you for doing this, by the way, Jeff and Claire and Keenan. I know you got a lot to do, so I'll just make it very brief. I'm in the condo, as you know, on the lakeshore, Keenan, and I've noticed in the last 2 years that the noise level down here has really got absurd. And I'm not a nitpicker. I know there's traffic, but the amount of people that have these new souped up cars, and believe me, I got no problem with a young fellow in a souped up car, but this backfiring, deliberately getting in between the buildings, waiting for a red light. I've never seen people wait for a red light before. But these guys time red lights where they can get there and park their cars and the motorcycles. And I, I've sent you letters about the police budget, I have some concerns about that. But one of the things that I have noticed in my time in Barrie is a lack of police presence on the roads. When I first came here, I play hockey down in Innisfil, and I found a good group of old timers down there. And I know going down Yonge Street 4 or 5 years ago, you did not go much above 5 to 10 clicks over the speed limit, or you're going to get pulled over, especially by the old folks home down there by Gibby's. Now going down there, it's crazy. And I haven't seen a radar down there in probably 2 or 3 years. And it's the same old front here, and I know they're 24/7, and I'm not kicking the crap out of the police. I just believe that the budget can be looked at a lot differently than what it is, and they need to be a little more cooperative in this community. but I really have noticed there's a real lack of police presence. And I think we can do some. I know it's really bugging my wife to the point where we actually are having a place built up in Collingwood, and I don't like to do that. Or we're going into a quiet area, or it's been delayed over a year, so we're here for a while. I'll be bugging you for another year or so anyway. So, but the other thing I wanted to mention is that on homelessness, with COVID, I've been reading a lot, and I understand there's going to be a lot of people working from home. I know my wife has been working from home. She's retiring the end of July, but she even told me, she said, if she'd known that she'd be working from home and it's convenient, she might have stayed a few extra months, because it looks like at her work, maybe a lot of the people are going to continue to do that. So there's going to be some office space available, and I wonder if the town has ever looked at it, or you know what the bylaws are or whatever, is taking some of that available office space and looking at affordable housing, converting some of that vacant space that may be coming available. I know Toronto is probably going to have a big issue with it. And I think that's space that could be looked at in the future. So, you know, I won't take up any more of your time. Those are my concerns. But again, on the police budget, I really think we need to take a look at it. And just briefly, I know it's going to be in the future a little bit, but that development in Bunkers Creek is just crazy, guys. It's way over. I mean, it's over the top. And we know once we start petitioning people, and once we go after the boaters, they're going to lose. The marina is going to be dark afternoon. Once 12 o'clock comes, when those big towers go up, the marina is going to be dark. They're not going to get the sun. And we don't need that type of congestion. If they want to build 2 towers at the same size as ours, or a couple of stories bigger maybe, right on Bradford where that vacant building is, that's fine. And use that park as what it is, leave it the way it is. But once they start constructing there, whatever you think, Bunkers Creek is gone. The creatures that are there, once they start hammering the pilings into the ground, they're gone. And it'll never be the same. And we just don't need that congestion. It's bad enough here as it is. So anyway, thanks for taking my time and taking the time, and appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Lots there, and I won't try and address it all just in the interest of time, but I do appreciate all the comments, and with great respect, I hope your contractor in Collingwood is delayed for years. I appreciate the remarks on all issues. I think briefly on the police issue, when COVID hit, there were redeployments, and the traffic enforcement was reduced. There's no way around that. They prioritized, and unfortunately, with the number of the complexity of calls, what happened really was calls for service actually went down. But the officers had to respond in PPE. There were challenges with people claiming they had COVID when they were being arrested and so forth. And you can imagine the circumstance that creates for the arresting officers who are dealing with somebody who claims to be positive and all those sorts of issues. As you probably have read in the last couple of weeks, the traffic unit has now redeployed. They've been able to get back out in force. Last week, they wrote twice as many tickets as in a typical week. I totally agree with you about the noise and the speeding. I have noticed it. Big Bay Point Road has been a huge issue, and they blitzed it and wrote hundreds of tickets. So, I mean, the effort does need to be made now. On your other issues, thank you, and you've corresponded with us before, and I do appreciate you sharing your views. Keenan, is anything you want to respond to from Ken there?
Yeah, just quickly, thank you, Ken, and I'll miss you if you do leave. That's sad to hear. But on the issue of the loud vehicles, I was just on a patio the other day, and there's some obnoxious people. And it's a tough one because you have to have the police responding to that, even though it's a bylaw issue. When the muffler of a car is louder than a certain decibel, it's a bylaw that they're violating. The police are the only ones that can respond and actually stop a car in traffic. And I think this actually ties into the conversation around the types of calls that the police are dealing with. They are dealing with very complex calls, like people in mental health crisis, and that ties up an officer for a long time, hours and hours and hours. And so that takes them away from doing things like traffic stops and enforcing those types of bylaws. So that's a conversation that is ongoing. And then on the development, I want everyone to know that there's still some opportunity for people to engage on that particular development along the waterfront. Reach out anytime with your concerns. And our staff will be doing a report. They expect it sometime in the fall. And then there's an opportunity then for you to speak either for or against what their recommendation is. So I would encourage you to do that as well. Thanks.
Thank you for that. So I'm going to provide a submitted question. We've had a couple of questions on this. When will the need for a supervised consumption site be addressed? Why is council allowed this important health issue to fall off the radar?
Why don't I start, and then Keenan, probably I'll hand over to you. Council hasn't dropped anything. The proponents of the safe consumption site are the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit, the Gilbert Center, and CMHA. And as you can imagine, the health unit has, because they're leading the fight against COVID, have redeployed all their people, and they notified council that as a consequence, they had to put the application process on hold. They are watching the situation with opioids, and it has been an issue that we initially actually saw a very positive change. When COVID first hit, we actually saw a huge drop in opioid overdoses. Unfortunately, that has started to come back. As the health unit with reopening is now slowly starting to be able to handle some other priorities, they're moving some of their people back to what they were doing before March 13th. The hope is that they will pick up that application and run with it again. So it is delayed, but certainly not dropped.
Thanks for that, Mayor Lehman. Yeah, this is an issue that deeply concerns me. And in my opinion, it's a moral failure on our part to have not made this happen. Council did reject the initial proposed location. So in my opinion, it does fall on our shoulders in a big way. I'm happy to hear that the applicants are starting their work up again. They have a site selection advisory committee that's doing the work of identifying sites throughout Ward 2, because that's where the problem is. Let's be real about that. Hopefully they'll be starting their engagement with the community, the consultations that they'll be having with the neighbors soon. But it's painful to me that people are still dying because of this service not being available to them. And it's unacceptable that we have needles being found in alleyways and business doorways downtown. And we know that a safe consumption site can help prevent those things. You know what, we as Canadians, we listened to our public health officials when it came to COVID-19. And I think that's why we've seen such success. I wish we had listened to our public health officials when it came to the opioid crisis as well. It's not too late though. We can listen to the experts, and we can follow the science and save lives. So I hope we would do that. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, I think you've covered it pretty well. I'm certainly hopeful that the agencies will be able to bring back something to council for our consideration when they get the time to do it. And it seems to me that it's definitely overdue, and we'll probably have a struggle dealing with it, but I think it's time that we dealt with it. So as soon as the folks that are dealing with it come back to us, I'm sure we'll have to work on it and get a solution.
Thanks for that. So we have a question from Sue. Masks have proven very effective against COVID. Will the city be making masks mandatory to help protect workers in Barrie?
Thanks for that. So from the beginning with COVID-19, one of the things that I've said every single day is just what Keenan just was talking about. We follow the lead of public health. And to this point, our local medical officer of health has not advised making masks mandatory, but I can tell you that is certainly a discussion that is constant. We are now seeing some cities take that initiative themselves on the advice of public health. We've seen a few medical officers of health do it themselves through order. I will tell you that so far we are making masks mandatory on public transit where social distancing is difficult, may not be possible. So there's, you know, there's an initial step there. I would tell you that I'm most concerned about those environments where we are seeing community spread, and this is a conversation that we have continued to have with public health. Us acting without the support of public health or the direction of public health is something that I have not done to this point, either through the emergency order or council has done without the advice of public health. So I've been waiting, to be frank, we've been waiting to hear what the direction was locally. To this point, our medical officer of health has said that you should wear a mask where distancing isn't possible, but he continues to reiterate that distancing is the most effective piece. I'm sorry, that probably doesn't sound like the kind of clear yes that you sound like you were looking for, but I can only tell you that since the beginning of this very unusual kind of crisis, we've had to rely on our experts in public health, and I want to continue to do that.
Thank you. So we have Don Hooks who'd like to give us a chat. Let me see if I can get him to go in. Don,
Hi,
are you
Don.
there?
How's that? Mr. Mayor, can you hear me? Good.
All good.
I'm sort of jumping on the back of the gentleman 2 people ago on Lakeshore about the speeding guys and the guys who are missing body parts, so they put them on their car instead. And I've spoken with, sorry guys, I've spoken with the police, and you know, they're overstrained, I get that, and they've done a great job, as have all you guys. And I don't know what the solution is. They say, you know, they put in the portable radar testing, but I think that's done during the day. And during the day isn't the issue of speeding because the traffic's so heavy. It's, you know, 5 o'clock till 11 or even after 11 at night, and particularly on weekends, between the motorcycles and the cars. And, you know, I don't know the answer, but I also know on Lakeshore, there's no speed signs, like 40, 30, 50 between Hooters, hate to use that as a landmark, but all the way down to where Home Hardware is. Going that way, there's not one speed sign. I've sent you an email on that, Mr. Mayor. Coming the other way, there's 2 before the Lions Club thing.
That's right.
Not that that's going to stop anybody. And you know, I know the police are overburdened. They got better things to do than to stop some of these guys. But I had to close a window just before I talked to you because I'm right on the lakeshore, and some kid's going to get whacked. I mean, I've almost been hit 6, 7 times just crossing at a light. And I know you got bigger things to fry, like the homeless and the needles and all that stuff. And if we can help, I can tell you, all the people in my condo and the 5 beside me, if I went door to door and get $100 from everybody, we could pay for whatever it is that's required to do on Lakeshore. And you want a good idea, put a toll at each end, charge $0.25, and that's good for the city.
Yeah. Thanks for this. I'll tell you, Don, I mean, I've heard since I was the Ward 2 councillor, the concern about loud mufflers, and I'm not going to tell you that it was a priority for the police. It was not. I am hearing more about that in the last 3 months than I have ever heard before by a factor of 3 or 4, and I've seen and heard it myself. There's just no question something's going on, and my theory is that some of the individuals who like to make noise with their cars or drive stupid think they can get away with it right now. And you know, I think you know, there's some belief out there that COVID creates the opportunity for people to act differently and not get caught. Barrie police have been trying very hard to message that's not the case. They're still around. I remember they stopped somebody and the guy actually said to them, "I didn't think you were arresting people anymore." Well, of course they are. I guess the best I can say to you is this, Don. I'm hearing the concern so much. we will take it again to the Barrie Police, and we know this is concentrated in the area where these guys like to show off. There are a couple of other spots, though. We've had a huge issue with stunt driving and modified cars on Big Bay Point from Huronia out, actually all the way out to Friday Harbor in Innisfil. So that has been blitzed, and if it can be blitzed, then we can blitz the lakeshore. So we'll take it back to them, and thank you for.
I know
again,
speed bumps are an issue, particularly because you don't want a fire engine going down there at 60 kilometers an hour to a fire and bouncing all over the place. I get that. But, you know, recently you look in Toronto, that poor lady and her 3 kids, that's exactly what's going to happen someday. We don't want that in the news, and we don't want that to happen to our citizens. That's why I moved up here from Toronto, to be quiet.
Yep.
It's not happened yet, but you guys are doing a great job. Thank you.
Thanks, Don. Thanks for this.
Thanks, Don. And just quickly, I've been watching out of Edmonton. They've started a new technology similar to photo radar, where they detect the sound of a vehicle, and if it goes over a certain decibel, there's an automatic ticket. I think that's something we can watch and see how it goes, and then perhaps down the line, that's something we can look at.
Thank you guys so much. Thanks.
So we have another question from our Q&A. Will we ever have food stores?
I assume they mean downtown, yeah. Again, quickly, I remember talking to a vice president at Sobeys after they bought IGA and Foodland. And she said to me, how many apartment buildings are being built in the downtown? And at that time, we only had 1 under construction, 15 Maple. And I said, but there's a lot more coming. And she said, call me when they're there. Sad reality, grocery stores got bigger, they got further apart. It's kind of like the philosophy behind schools. And now you see them in pad retail spread out in the commercial areas and very few small grocery stores. I would remind you, we have Nutrition Plus in the core, who are wonderful people and a wonderful store. But in terms of that broader full service grocery store, I know it is controversial, the number of high-rise developments that are proposed in our downtown. That is what is going to create enough customers for there to be a larger full-service food store in the downtown. I think you will find, if you talk to smart centers, that there's some interest in one going in there.
Thanks for that, Jeff. Definitely a concern that gets raised a lot, and I can tell you I'm invested in this one too, living downtown. Right after I got elected, I had a very similar conversation with a vice president at Loblaws. And he told me that the reality of the demographics downtown right now is that we have a lot of single people, we have a lot of seniors, and they're filling up baskets, they're not filling up carts. And then we don't quite have the population density yet in the downtown, but we're getting there. A lot of really exciting things are on the horizon. So I feel like we're on the cusp of getting there. So let's hope and continue supporting the local businesses as best we can in the meantime.
So we have a submitted question with regards to separate bike lanes throughout the wards, and is there plans to have separate bike lanes throughout wards 1 and 2?
Actually, I'm going to let Keenan start on that one as a member of the ATS committee.
Yeah, sure. I'll take a stab at it. So we have an active transportation master plan for the city that looks at short-term things that can be done to improve active transportation, medium-term and long-term. And so in the short term, there are quite a few proposed new bike lanes, whether it's on-road bike lanes, buffered bike lanes, so where there's a bit of a gap between the car traffic and the lane, or separated bike lanes where it's actually, there's a curb dividing. And there are quite a few that are proposed for both wards 1 and 2. So hoping we can create a network in the long term. The issue is really, unfortunately, over the past couple decades, we haven't been putting in the infrastructure when we had the opportunity. In my opinion, there hasn't really been the political will to do so in the past. Often these lanes include removing on-street parking. And when you remove on-street parking, a lot of people get pretty upset with that idea, because they're used to having visitors over parking on the street, and rightfully so. But I think if we're going to try to create the city of the future where people are walking, biking, taking transit, we have to have the courage to say this is a change we need to make for the better of the city, and for a cleaner, healthier future. And so hoping that we can get there. But you can take a look at the transportation master plan on the city's website if you like to get a bigger picture of what's coming down the pipe.
Yeah,
Claire, do you want to comment?
a lot more of that bike lanes as well. And in Ward 1, the newest piece is on Georgian Drive from Penetang to where the existing bike lane is. So you can now go all the way from Penetang to Duckworth. So at least we're making some progress. I'd like to see more people actually on those bike lanes. But I think the more bike lanes that we actually build, the more people will start to use them. So yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity, especially in Ward 1, where we could make biking a lot more prominent. And I think, along Blake Street, for example, it would be a really good place to get started on that, because I think that's a road that really lends itself to going into the direction of downtown. So yeah, we'll keep working on it. It's a retrofit job, so it takes a bit of extra work, but we'll get there.
Lake Street is, in so many ways, it's got a unique character. I mean, from the east edge of downtown out to close to Johnson, it's a classic City of Barrie lane and a half special. It's not quite 2 lanes, and it's of course treated and signed like 1 lane. Leaves lots of room for a proper bike lane. Should we ever should we line it that way or even separate it? And it's a great route to get in from an older neighborhood into the core. So I think that's a really good idea, Claire. We've also got some shoulder on that road that is disastrously bad. So there is definitely work to do there too. But especially when that area connects the college and the old East End into the downtown.
So we have a raised hand from Gary. Gary, if you'll join us now.
Hello, Marlene and councillors. I'm Gary Bell from the East End, and I do support any efforts you can put into bike lanes. I'm an avid cyclist. My question is about something at the very East End. I'm looking at a proposed mixed-use development on the county website of about 1,300 units, 2,600 people. All of this is on 130 acres of farmland now on the east side of Penetang-Washeen Road, opposite Steele Street, right there at Robertson's. This has been adopted by a county council motion in support of a minister's zoning order. There was no real staff report. They indicated all the things that would normally be required. My question to the 3 of you is, have you or will you ask your planning department for a review and comment on the merits of this for council's consideration and comment to the minister?
So short answer is we already have, but I'm going to let Claire take the longer answer on this one.
Yeah, a great question, Gary. And yeah, in fact, at council coming Monday night, there will be a discussion of that very topic. We have a report, or a preliminary report actually, from our planners. We have agreed with the county that we would have until the end of July to make our comments known on that application, and we intend to do that. So if you look on the agenda for last Monday night, you'll see an initial report from the planning department raising a whole series of questions. And yeah, we will probably be pursuing those, and there will be a fairly fulsome discussion, I think, on this coming Monday night. And then I suspect that at our meeting in early August, we will take a more definitive position at that point. But yeah, it is a fairly substantial proposal, and it certainly is going to impact the city of Barrie in a whole lot of different ways. So,
I'm glad to hear that.
Just a brief footnote on that, you know, because I've got strong views on this. The Minister of Municipal Affairs, who's actually an excellent minister. I mean, I've often disagreed with the government pre-COVID about many things, but this is a very good Minister of Municipal Affairs. On this issue, he's created a Pandora's box by granting some MZOs, Minister Zoning Orders, which were only ever intended to be for matters of provincial interest. They're a very blunt instrument. They override all public consultation. They override all local jurisdiction by elected officials. They were only ever intended for very rare cases of provincial interest. And unfortunately, now they're being seen as an alternative planning application process where you submit an application to the minister's office and they consider an MZO. And we certainly don't believe that's a good way to do business inside the city of Barrie. This is in the township of Oro-Medonte. The township chose to support a resolution asking for the MZO. So it's our neighbors. It is our neighbor's jurisdiction, but obviously it has substantial impacts on the city of Barrie because it's on the other side of the street. So we fully intend to be part of this process and make our concerns known.
Thank you.
stay tuned, as they say.
So we have a question. Is the city going to establish a post-COVID-19 committee to review the processes, including how to make up revenue shortfalls?
Maybe I'll start with that. Yes, that committee is council, though. We as the 11 of us, supported by the excellent work of our CAO and our executive management team, will deal with the implications on the city's budget. They are substantial. Our CAO has done incredible work with his team, and he would give the credit to his team, but he deserves a lot of it too, to reduce the city's costs almost exactly by the amount that we are anticipating as a revenue shortfall to September. That was real pain. And for our staff who were laid off in some cases, that was extremely difficult to do. And it should not have had to take place. We've seen federal and provincial support for every other sector of the economy to prevent layoffs, but not municipalities. And you know, that is a deep shame. We are months into this and have not seen any support. That being said, we're now being able to bring people back. Some of the fiscal impacts were not as severe as we anticipated. But you know, things like free transit for 3 months plus greatly reduced ridership anyway. I mean, we essentially have offered free transit for 3 months. That's a $2 million hit alone. And certainly the impact is larger than that. So what we're anticipating at this point, if there is not a second wave, if things return to some semblance of normal, if people continue to pay their property taxes, all of those are ifs, then we have been able to manage the impacts to a reasonable range. But the other thing we've had to do is not issue tenders for a whole bunch of capital work to try and compensate for those revenue shortfalls. So it is impacting the city. It has impacted the service levels. You've all seen it in terms of park maintenance and other things that we've had to limit our service level. But I think it's fair to say that it was necessary, and I believe our executive management team did the responsible, if very difficult thing, to make cuts to the city in a very rapid manner to try and limit the fiscal impact.
Thank you for that. So we have another question from Marshall. One of our previous speakers raised Mary Street is problematic. That street is now temporarily 2 ways with no parking on either side. Yet there are a number of businesses there that have no customer parking. Could you reduce the speed and allow parking on one side?
So this is, thanks for the question, Marshall. So this is as a result of the construction that we see on Dunlop Street. And I have spoken to a number of businesses along Mary Street there. From the businesses I have talked to, the vast majority of them do have at least some parking space at their business. So that's a positive. But this is a temporary measure to get through the construction. And I think, at least from the businesses I've spoken to, most understand that, but I appreciate you raising that.
Folks, we are at 8 o'clock, but Claire Keenan and I are all available to continue for a little while longer. So we will continue to take some questions, answer some questions for about another 15 minutes or so more, and wrap up a little bit after that. So Lauren, if you want to keep sending us some questions, that'd be great.
Perfect. I've got one from Andrea. Are there plans to allow secondary suites in Ward 1?
The answer is yes. In fact, we have passed all those bylaws, and it was only part of Ward 1 that was exempted from second suites, the area sort of in the vicinity, well, north of Steel Street. But that has now been included in the second suite permission. Staff, we've made some changes for the bylaw across the whole city, so the rules are a bit clearer and better, we think. But yeah, you can now put a second suite, make an application for a second suite in all of the city throughout.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. I'm going to go to a submitted question here. Most Ward 1 residents are not against rental properties. However, they are upset that a landlord can own a property and make money and not keep up with simple property maintenance, i.e. lawn cutting, garbage recycling, snow removal. They often blame their tenants. Is it possible to review what is going on with this issue?
You know, I'll bet you I get several calls a day on that very issue. I think that we need to really start doing something about the rentals in Ward 1. And you know, the problem is that 90% of building owners that rent their place out, never a problem. It's that 10% or 5% or maybe even 2% that just cause the issue. I've been looking at licensing rentals, so that you need permission from the city every year to get a license in order to rent your premises out. That wouldn't be for people that live there and then rent out a room, but it would be, you know, for the absentee landlord, if you will. And that might be a good way to kind of keep track of the issues and bring them to attention. So I'm pursuing that kind of thing because I think certainly in the north end of the ward, Ward 1, in and around the college area, we tend to have those kind of problems there, and maybe with a bit more oversight by the city, we could resolve some of those issues. So I'm working on it. Hopefully we'll get somewhere in the next year or so. But I think that absentee landlord licensing is probably a really good vehicle in order to be able to handle some of that.
Thank you for that. So we have a question from Janet. Beyond COVID-19, what plans does the city have to build up small businesses and the downtown?
Great question. Why don't I start and then Keenan? Yeah. So we're trying to use the response to COVID-19 to create a real solid base for those efforts and to expand the efforts. So on day 3 of the crisis, day 2 of the crisis, I guess, we created what was called the Economic Support Task Force, and that included all industry associations in Barrie, as well as the Sandbox, Georgian Colleges, Burnick Center, ourselves, and the Chamber of Commerce and others. Everything we've done since the beginning of that task force work, and that sort of morphed into our recovery planning effort, which involved a huge consultation with businesses, was all designed around creating long-term capacity. So it wasn't just, you know, immediate, like one-off efforts. It was around building, for example, e-commerce platforms that could be accessible for small businesses, that could be accessible for the downtown. The Patios Everywhere program was all about trying to help our food sector by opening up some public spaces temporarily to allow outdoor seating areas for restaurants. And lo and behold, when the province opened them up, you could only sit outside. You still can. So we've been trying to, do some things that create long-term strength for them. I think the longer-term question, though, really is going to be around, COVID will end. I mean, there will be an end to this. It will be a vaccine or treatment or both. And what can we take from the efforts that have already been undertaken to allow small businesses to compete, and then specifically in the downtown, what can be done to support them? So again, immediate efforts, those kinds of recovery things are like a recovery toolkit where we're helping with the costs of some of the measures you have to take. And parking downtown, by the way, is free until September. That hasn't got any media attention yet because everybody's focused on how much we want to charge out of towners to park on the waterfront. But we in the same motion made downtown parking free until the fall. And I will tell you that I really believe in the future of our downtown through creative industries, and creative industries isn't just arts and culture. It is the marrying of arts and culture and design and tech. And if you look in the second and third and fourth floor of buildings in the downtown, that's what you're going to find. It is a remarkable, actually, but notwithstanding challenges that we've got in the downtown, remarkable cluster of young, fast-growing and entrepreneurial companies spanning a number of different sectors, but really focused on creative industries, including tech. That, I think, is a big part of the future of our downtown. I am also a huge believer in the food and drink sector, and then I'll hand it over to Keenan to answer, to give his views. When I first became Ward 2 councillor, the number one complaint I had was the bar scene in downtown Barrie, that downtown Barrie was just a giant beer garden and there were constant problems with violence. And that was actually true. We had a lot of problems with violence after closing time. It's still not perfect. There are still huge crowds of people, not at the moment because they're closed, but until COVID. But the character of it all has changed so much. When we started the patio program 6 years ago, people were very angry. It was popular with some, and it was very unpopular with others. I would argue today the patio program has been extremely successful. We had 35 of them last summer, and of course now with COVID, it's more because it's in other spaces, although it's only in a portion so far of the downtown. I'm of belief that this all goes together. That by the way, independent restaurants are among the most creative of industries. When you put great food and drink together with arts and culture, together with technology, you actually attract other businesses and you create a lively environment where people want to grow their businesses. So that's the goal. And I think post-COVID, if we can hold on to some of that different use of public space, and maybe even that sense that we need to pay more attention to small businesses in places like the downtown core and in other parts of the city, I think that would be a really good legacy of what we've had to deal with, because they have been among the most challenged by COVID. There's no question.
Thanks for that, Marilyn. That was a great overview of all the things being done. And speaking specifically about the downtown, I'm so excited about the new streetscape. If you hadn't had a chance to get out, walk the streets in the parts that are open and finished, do so. It's really nice. It's a great atmosphere, and I think that's going to be huge in the future for the downtown. And then more longer term, I keep hearing from businesses that they need more boots on the ground, more people in the streets, walking the streets, shopping, going to cafes, just walking around and happening across a store window that they like and maybe buying something. So the way to achieve that is to have more people living in the downtown. And there are quite a few proposed developments, approved developments as well in the downtown. And we're going to see our population rise if all things go according to plan with those developments, which obviously COVID has raised some concerns, but hoping that we'll come roaring back and we'll have more people living down here, because that also creates safer streets. More eyes on the streets is a good thing for safety, and it is a good thing for business as well. So hopefully we'll see that come to fruition.
And I just want to really echo that thought. You know, busy streets are safer streets. Anywhere in the world you go, anywhere in Canada you go. The streets where people feel unsafe is where they are alone, or there's the perception from people who might take advantage of a bad situation, that they can do that because there's nobody around and nobody watching. Busy streets are safe streets, and what we need downtown are streets to be busy. With people, by the way, pedestrians, not necessarily piling in more cars. Not in the downtown.
Yep, I'm going to invite everybody to come with me downtown. I walk from Ward 1 downtown a number of times a week, and then along our waterfront. I mean, we're really fortunate to have a downtown that's right on the waterfront. I mean, how could you get a better scene than that? And the part of the street that's now open and finished, or close to finished, I think it's just going to be a wonderful atmosphere. So come on down. There's no reason not to. It's just a great place to be.
Thanks.
Go
Sorry,
ahead, Lauren. No, go ahead.
Sorry, we just have a comment or a question based off of that from Ron. Could you comment on the thinking for the waterfront this summer with the brief closure of Lakeshore? Was it a success? Parking enforcement regarding use of equipment, fees for park use and parking. Thank you.
Oof. That's a tough question. So Keenan, you're up. No,
Sure.
I'm just kidding.
I can take it.
No, well, you know, I'll say one quick thing about
Sure,
one piece of that, and then you please kick in.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's unfortunate more people didn't use the closed lane. I've been reflecting on this a lot because I was a big fan of that. I think, you know, when you close a lane right beside several other existing paths, people are going to choose the prettier walk, which is the boardwalk and the bike path, and so we didn't see the numbers there that we had. Frankly, I had hoped that it would encourage more people to be able to use that for recreation. I guess the parking enforcement piece, yeah, at the moment, by emergency order, we've made it waterfront resident parking only. That is in part to give time for us to fully open up the waterfront facilities. They're still not fully open, and there's, you know, a few reasons for that. Plus the playground's not open yet. That's part of phase 3. We have to wait for the province on that. So in terms of vision though, it's too bad. I had hoped for a more successful pilot because I am frankly a believer that, you know, you can do pop-up closures of roads, for example, on weekends and things, which is what our downtown merchants have asked for Dunlop. Which are just wonderful, and maybe that's the part step towards pedestrianization or part-time pedestrianization of some of the downtown. But on the waterfront, Keenan?
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, and thanks for the question, Ron. I was also disappointed to see the numbers along Lakeshore. I tried to get the counter to go up by just biking back and forth endlessly, but apparently it wasn't enough. But I think part of the reason why it wasn't as successful as we may have hoped, it was kind of a disjointed closure. If all of Lakeshore from Tiffin all the way to Simcoe Street, or I guess to the Toronto Street condo building, had been closed, I think we would have seen higher numbers. But you kind of had to go on the path for a bit and then deke over to the closed portion. There were some concrete barriers that posed some issues as well with the spacing of those from the curb. So to be honest, I don't think it was a perfect execution of what we could have done there. I know we didn't close the entire length of Lakeshore because of concerns around emergency vehicle response time, and which is obviously a very valid and important concern. But I hope that we don't look at that pilot project and use it as a reason to say no to these types of inventive things in the future. I think it's always worth trying. And if you fail, you fail, but at least you know. So I hope we can look at other areas of the city where we may need more safe pedestrian and cycling areas, and hopefully we can do some of that. And we're getting close to the time, so let's get it early.
Yeah, maybe just one last question, Lauren.
Certainly. So we have a question from Sarah. I would like to ask a question about hazardous waste at the landfill. I'm very concerned that limiting drop-off to Saturday, which requires getting in the general lineup, makes it less likely that folks will separate and manage hazardous waste properly. Is the depot at the bottom of the hill no longer viable?
You know, he's been patiently waiting for an hour and 15 minutes, and now we're going to tag in CAO Michael Prouse, because I'm going to guess neither Keenan or Claire or I know the answer to that off the top of our heads. Mr. Prouse, do you know, would you be able to answer Sarah's question?
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I know if I hung in there long enough, I would be able to take a question. Thank you for the opportunity. I can tell you the intention is to open the bottom of the landfill for the hazardous waste. We really had to approach it as a multi-year approach because of cost reasons. But you should expect that probably as part of next year's budget approval to expand that service so that people can utilize that service at the bottom of the hill.
And on that note, we have covered everything from high-rise development to hazardous waste and minister's zoning orders to COVID. But I know we have come nowhere close to answering all the questions, even the ones pre-submitted. We only had a taste of them. So I guess in wrapping up tonight, I want to remind everybody listening, we've still got almost 50 people on, and thank you for staying on. If we didn't get to your question, please do submit them to us. We will endeavor to respond. It is a busy time, so be a little bit patient. We are bombarded at the moment with waterfront parking opinions, among other things. But we will try and answer your questions as best we can after tonight. I have to say an enormous thank you to Lauren Wild, Rob Emerson, Nina and Michael Prouse as well for supporting, but Lauren and Rob who set this up tonight, tested the technology, gave us our marching orders, and Lauren for moderating. So everybody who's on the attendee side, I know you can't see her and she can't see you, but we're all going to do this right now for the incredible work that gets done behind the scenes to allow us to look good like this. And I thank you for participating. This seemed to be go very well in terms of the technology and the ability for us to get to at least a number of different topics. And I really want to thank Keenan and Claire for being guinea pigs on this as well. Council has been busy at work, but ironically, we're doing this town hall just before the last meeting before the summer break. If I can look ahead a little bit in closing, Monday night, we continue to meet virtually. Council has been extremely busy. We've had some Tuesday night planning committee meetings, including this Tuesday. But that augurs well. It augurs well because it shows that people are still interested in building a better community. Whether the designs that are proposed to us for developments end up being the final ones, or whether there are substantive changes, whether we have new proposals that come from the community or members of council. Council's been hard at work even during COVID, attempting to move the community forward, and always as we try and respond to the challenges of COVID, to make improvements that aren't temporary, that have at least the potential to become permanent. And I guess that would be my closing thought for everyone here, that we do have an opportunity right now to change our community for the better, as difficult as this has been, and as tragic as some of the aspects of COVID have been, and even those are an instigator for change. We've also seen the way that the community does support one another, and we have learned to do new things like walk a lot more. And I hope we're able to provide opportunities to continue the good things, even as we fight the virus. Everybody, please stay safe. Please wear a mask when you go out shopping. Please keep distancing the best you can. We have done a great job as a community in fighting COVID and keeping each other safe, but we got to keep it up a little while longer. So the very best for a great summer to you, and Canada Day next week. And thank you again, everybody, for tuning in. And I think, Keenan, Claire, any closing thoughts before we wrap it all the way up?
I think I would just echo exactly what you've said, Mayor Lehman. It's a challenging time, I think, for a lot of people in our community. I think it's also a time when we're trying out some new things, hey, like tonight. And some of them are going to work and some of them are not going to work so well. But I'm really encouraged by the just the increase in the community feeling that I get in Ward 1, and I think it's true in Ward 2 as well. That, you know, there's a lot of people out there that are talking to each other that may never have talked to each other before. And I think there's a lot of caring going on. So yeah, COVID is definitely an issue, and it's really tough for a lot of people, but also there are some good things. And I'm hoping that when all's said and done and this is behind us, that we will hang on to those good things that build our community.
Absolutely. So thank you all for being here. Amazing questions and comments, and looking forward to talking with more of you after if you didn't have a chance to have your comments or questions addressed. I miss all of you. I can't wait to see you in person when that's possible. As soon as it is possible, I'll be hosting a meeting at the Barrie Public Library downtown branch so that we can all have a big discussion about what's next. So thanks again, and have a great night.
Thanks, everyone. The universal end to a Zoom call. Bye-bye.